Hey, how's it going? And I appreciate you tuning in and watching this tutorial. I realize you have a lot of choices in Unreal Engine tutorials, so we appreciate you flying with Hawaii Film School. Okay, so what we're going to do today is show you this kind of trippy functionality related to Event Dispatcher. So I'll just show you real quick how this works, and then I'm going to walk you through all these terrible pitfalls and rabbit holes that you can fall in doing this. And believe me, I could use a drink right now. But anyway, here we go. So these are pressure plates and they cause an explosion. But the way it's coded in blueprints using Event Dispatchers, the first time through they don't explode. See that? Go over it. No explosion. First time through, notice that third one, a print string came up. Now watch the second time through. And it's going to keep going every time. See, and you notice on that third one, we did get a print string up there saying that is BP third exploding. So if you stick around, you should gain some insight into how and what event dispatchers are and how they might be of help to you. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit escape, and we're going to build this from scratch, and hopefully this won't take too long. So we're going to go new project, third person, and trust me, you're going to get some really good tips out of this, and I have been studying the heck out of this. So you're getting the latest information, I feel like. Okay, so what we're going to do is I am going to right click, and we're going to get a blueprint class, and we get actor, and I'm going to F2, and I'm going to name this BP explosion dispatch. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a pressure plate just like you saw, and when the first time through no explosion, second time through it explodes. And then in this process I'm going to explain to you, I can do this without an event dispatcher, but I'm using an event dispatcher to show you how these event dispatchers work and how you could use them. I think that they're underutilized, and the reason that they are is because I think they're intimidating and kind of confusing at first. So but once you understand them, I think they're fantastic. So we'll double click in here, and we're going to go ahead and dock this. Now there's a couple things we need to do. We're just going to start off by making the pressure plate, but first we're going to click up here, and we're going to search for something called spatially loaded, and we want to uncheck that. We do not want these objects spatially loaded. But you're going to see that it doesn't matter, even though I do this, we're still going to have a problem with the objects becoming unloaded. But I have a solution for that. I'll show you when we get to that. Okay, so now the first thing we're going to do is go add, and we're going to get a cylinder, which is going to be our pressure plate. We're just going to drag that onto the scene like that. And in its details panel, I don't see the details panel, so that must mean it's not checked up there in the window. We are going to just come down to scale and put this at 0.1, just like that. And that's just our pressure plate, very, very simple. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to create our event dispatcher. Now you can think of an event dispatcher, the best analogy I have is like an Amber Alert. It's like an all points bulletin. It's a broadcast notification to everywhere and anyone. And if it's relevant to you, you'll do something, and if it's not relevant to you, you just keep going. But it's an event to everyone. Now, the analogy here in Unreal Engine would be that the event dispatcher not only can communicate within the blueprint itself, which was what we're going to be doing, but it can communicate to other blueprints, and on a case-by-case basis, it can also communicate to the level blueprint. So it has a little bit more, the communication with the level blueprint's a little more challenging because you've got to do each individual reference. It doesn't do a global reference to the level blueprint, not that I'm able to figure out yet. So I'll show you exactly what I mean in just a minute here. So to create this event dispatcher, all we have to do is click here, and I'm just going to call this BP explosion dispatch, and then we'll compile and save it. And then we need to add an input. So the input, I'm just going to put, this is going to be, I'm just going to call it BP dispatch ref. And then we just come here and we're going to search for the blueprint explosion dispatch, this one right here. I don't know why it didn't select it. BP explosion dispatch, and we want the object reference, and there it is. And then that's all we have to do is compile and save it. So now we can do is just jump over into the event graph. Well, actually I can come back to the viewport here, click on the cylinder, come down here and go to on event begin overlap. So we want this. So basically the character is going to come along, he's going to trigger. Oh, you know what? I forgot something very important, by the way. Here under collision, I forgot to, we have to change this to overlap all dynamic objects, otherwise it won't trigger anything. So sorry about that. I should have pointed that out sooner. So anyway, back in the event graph, the actor is going to walk on the cylinder, and then this is going to set our initial pulse. So what we're going to do is, now watch this. This is interesting. On the event dispatcher, if we go to drag it onto the graph, notice all the functions that we have. We can call the event, we can bind it to other events, we can unbind it, we can unbind all, and not only can it call, it can be called itself, and that's how it would communicate with other blueprints within this blueprint, with other blueprints, and also within the level blueprint. And you can also assign it and bind it to events. So create and bind it to events as well. So the event dispatcher has just this wide range of functionality here. And so what we're going to do though is we're just going to call it. Now the one thing I wanted to say is that I don't have to do an event dispatcher necessarily to create the effect I'm trying to create, but I'm just using it to make an example. So right here we're giving an example of in the same blueprint how it's communicate within the same blueprint. So it's going to call basically itself right here. Then what it's going to do is I'm going to drag off again, and now we're going to bind it to an event. So it's going to make a call, and it's going to bind itself to an event. Now if I were to compile and save right now, we're going to get an error because there's no event tied to it. So to connect it to an event, I can just drag off and go add event and add a custom event. I don't even need to give it a name. And then I can drag off of, well, I can just right click here and go spawn actor from class, and this will trigger our explosion right here. And this is because we have the starter content in here. So we're going to go ahead, and I meant to say that when you start this game, it does require the starter content. And then we're going to drag off of, this will create the explosion, and then we just need to have the explosion happen where the cylinder is. So we just need to get the location for the cylinder, which is get actor location, and that's right there. And I can just put this in here like that. And now we've got our whole event. So what's going to happen is the character's going to walk on the cylinder, and we have the collision enabled so that appropriately so that happens. That would be here. We have the collision overlap all dynamics. So that's what's going to trigger this. It's going to send out a pulse. It's going to call the event. Dispatcher is basically going to call itself. Nothing's going to happen, but it's going to continue on down the line. Now it's going to bind this to this event, to this spawn an explosion at the cylinder's location. And the first time through, what is going to happen is it's unbound. So it's going to call and then bind it the first time through. That's why it doesn't explode the first time through. It's unbound. And then the second time through, it's going to be bound. And this time when it calls, it's going to explode because it's been bound. So the first time through, it's not bound, but it's going to call, it's going to bind. Then the second time through, it's call, and it's because it's bound, then it's going to explode the second time through. So it's very, very interesting. So now we're done here. And now I can show you some more stuff, and just a couple things I can show you, and then we'll be done. So there's our 3 plates, our 3 instances. Now notice they're all coming in loaded, and they're going to unload here at some point. So that even though I put to not spatially load them, they're going to unload, which is very frustrating. But watch what happens now. So here we are in our scene. And so remember, the character walks along, it makes a call, and now it just bound it to that explosion event. It called and it just bound it to the explosion event. It called and it bound it to the explosion event. Now they're all bound. So now when I walk, it's going to call and it can rebind them, but it's just going to trigger the explosion immediately because it's bound. They're bound now. And they'll keep going now. Okay, so that's that. Now I want to show you one thing that tripped me up and gave me a big headache, and hopefully just knowing this will save you some frustration. If I escape now, I still see my objects are in the scene, so we're good. Okay, so now I don't have to show you. Now I'm going to show you something else, and this is the last thing. So I showed you how the event dispatcher can communicate within the same blueprint. Now I want to show you how it can communicate with the level blueprint. This is very interesting. If I click on this, if I select this, let's say that's the third cube here, the BP Explosion Dispatch 3. And I go into the level blueprint, and I open the level blueprint. If I right click, I can go add. What is the name of the BP Explosion Dispatch? Yeah, okay. So if I come in here to the level blueprint and I go add event, add BP explosion, this is that functionality. But notice it's only going to be connected to that one plate, not to all the plates. So it's more selective at this level in the level blueprint. So if I come out here and I just, let's say, print a string, and I can just type in here, this is the third BP explosive plate, and I compile and save, and we go back into the game, hit play, see the same thing, no explosion first time, second time, no explosion first time, second time. Now watch, this time, no explosion, we get the message, and we'll keep getting the message, see? But what if we wanted it to communicate this to trigger? Well, what we'd have to do is we'd have to, oh, see now, look, it did it. It unloaded them. So how are we going to get around that headache? So what I figured out was, and I have this in another tutorial, you have to don't ask me why that you have to do this, but if you go onto world settings and you go to streaming, and it says enable streaming, you go ahead and enable it and say no, and then go ahead and disable it, and it'll say you are disabling all actors will always be loaded, go yes, and then that brings those back into the scene. So that was a big headache and a half for me, I'm telling you. So now we can select the second instance of this class and go in here, and now we can add an event for the second one. So add BP event, and notice how it's now tied to the second one. So I can just copy this, Control D, right? Control D, right? And drag this up here and connect this in here. And this would be the second plate, right? And compile and save. Come back in here and hit play. Now let's watch this again last time. So first time through, nothing happens, we get our print string, that's the third plate. Come here, nothing happens, we get our print string. Second time, message and explosion. So anyway, that's all I had for today. I hope you found this helpful. I know we kind of covered a lot of ground, but I think working together we'll get this all figured out, and I hope that we can start really coming up with some really cool games. So anyway, take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next.